Electricast.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
All right, here we go.
New Phineas and Ferb is here.
We're back, baby.
For 104 more days
I know what we're gonna do today.
of summer vacation.
I am ready for summer shenanigans. Let's do it. Oh, yeah.
All right. We're gonna bust Phineas and Ferb once and for all.
Are we gonna do this again?
New inventions, shenanigans, innators, adventures, and songs.
Brand new summer vacation.
New Phineas and Ferb starts June 5th on Disney Channel and next day on Disney Plus. On DisneyPlus.Disney.com.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
Now, this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you.
I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs.
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today we're talking a movie from 1972. What the hell, Wes? Deliverance?
Iris taking her first trip down the Cahulawassee River. At your insistence, however.
I thought it was Chattooga.
You wanted to cover this movie.
You said, I'm ready for any softball you might throw at me. Deliverance is not a softball.
It is for me.
How?
I watch this movie whenever I come across it.
Why? But why? Why? If it's like, okay, fine if like Back to the Future's on or A Christmas Story during the holidays or something like that. But Deliverance? This is your comfort film?
Tell me Deliverance isn't memorable and doesn't have a lasting cultural impact.
Well, I mean, considering I've been ignorant to its cultural impact for my entire life, I can't say that it has an impact. But what was the other part? It's memorable.
Can you
for all the wrong
Deliverance?
reasons? It's memorable, but I don't know if it's memorable for good reason.
Does this movie qualify as bros broing down?
There's some ribbing going on.
Ribs.
But no, it's it's no Hangover, if that's what you're asking. It's definitely a sausage fest. I was getting kind of tired of all the bro waxing. I found Burt Reynolds' Lewis character to be kind of insufferable until he became sympathetic. If I have to come down one way or the other, I'd say no, it's not my definition of a bro movie.
So the presentation, without this being a Rambo or a Commando or something like this, is definitely an alpha male movie. That's what it sets out to be. Even if Drew and Bobby aren't the seasoned veteran nature survivalist types that Lewis is, Bobby in particular, who's the meekest of the group, starts out that way, is the most contemptuous of the backwater bros.
These urbanites come in with a feeling of superiority to the locals. And the locals feel that and retaliate in their own way.
Yeah, we're on their territory. Here I am aligning myself with the bros in this movie. I'm pretty much a city bro, but they're on their turf, the hillbillies' turf. I don't even know if you can say that. And they get lost.
The H word.
And they need, the gas and directions and all that stuff. And they need people to help them with their bougie little quest to have cars always at their disposal.
They don't need directions. Sometimes you got to get a little lost before you find your way.
Yeah.
So Burt Reynolds looks so weird without a mustache. And what was he wearing? What was that zip-up vest wetsuit thing he was wearing?
Yeah, man, that's tack gear, basically. Tack for the wilderness, anyway. It's probably like a form-fitting neoprene suit.
Right.
Right? So if he gets into a battle, then your opponent just slides right off you, right? It's like a police uniform. It's supposed to be tight so your assailants can't grab a hold of you.
I thought he was wearing like a bespoke wetsuit life jacket, but then he put the life jacket on top of it, so that ruined that whole thing.
We ain't need them fancy words around here, bespoke. Don't mean nothing.
Ain't mean nothing, Wes.
Yeah, sorry.
So, but it showed off his guns pretty nicely. I'm guessing that he was like the eye candy, like they added Burt Reynolds for the ladies in Deliverance. Lewis was sporting some guns.
There were no guns in Deliverance. Only the mountain men had guns. It was Rambo-style bows and arrows for quiet, effective killing.
Speaking of, why do they keep burying and throwing guns off of cliffs? Like, if you're in mortal danger and peril, don't you keep the guns?
It's actually a cultural practice. They throw guns around willy-nilly so that people who are stumbling and trying to escape are more likely to happen upon guns in their time of need. It's like communal gun storage and stashing.
I don't buy it. There are people hunting you. You know that the hillbilly with no teeth is going to come back and avenge his bro.
He had teeth.
That you arrowed. Well, he had the flipper. Well, maybe he had a flipper. Maybe that was the brother-in-law that he shot. I'm pretty sure it was the brother-in-law that he shot on the cliff's edge.
I mean, aren't they all brothers-in-laws to each other?
Stop. But seriously, the sheriff's man, the lapdog or whatever at the end, who was like, these men are guilty. They're up to something. The one who had lost the brother-in-law, that was his brother-in-law. It wasn't the partner to the sodomy rape.
To show you how connected they all are, that was Dickie. That was the novelist of Deliverance.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, the sheriff. Crazy story
what?
there.
No.
Very
no,
backwoods story. Check it out. He and John Borman got into a real fight where supposedly John Borman got his nose busted and 4 teeth broken because he rewrote some of Dickie's dialogue. And then in true alpha male backwoods fashion, they became best bros. And they shot this film sequentially, which is crazy. And by the end of it, he invited Dickie back and put him in a cop's uniform, and he was the sheriff.
What? So bygones be bygones, and
Yep.
they're all bros now?
Absolutely. But going back to Burt Reynolds and the sex appeal thing, definitely he was the eye candy among the dudes for this movie. And yet he claims that the relative underperformance at the box office for Deliverance is because he was so hot. He actually did a nude spread where he's all lounging and hairy and covering his junk with his forearm. That was controversial, male nudity-ish, I guess, in a spread. And people reacted badly. And Burt Reynolds, despite calling this one of the best movies, if not the best movie he was ever in, at least for the time when he discussed it, said that he believes that controversy over his nude, hairy photo hurt the movie.
Was it, I don't know why you have to keep on insisting on the hairy detail, but was this in Playgirl or was this in Vanity Fair? Like, was it a reputable, was it like a trash mag?
It was too much pubes, I think, for a mainstream magazine. Maybe not today. But for the time, which is now, 53 years? I wanted to discuss this because at the time it came that Deliverance was celebrating its 50th anniversary. It took you 3 years to get on board finally.
I noticed that this had been on the list, on the programming list for forever, and I was like, all right, Wes wants to do something that he's ready to do. I'll give Deliverance a try not knowing anything about it. Coming in completely. Nothing.
But the pop culture, like the you got pretty mouth and them panties, take them off and all that, the dueling banjos, all that stuff is part of pop culture. You were aware of that, right? Just didn't know it came from Deliverance?
I must have seen the dueling banjos in a YouTube clip or something, compilation, but I was not familiar with any of the jokes around the backwoods rape. No. It took me probably 45 minutes before I recognized Jon Voight.
Wow.
I was like, man, I know this face, but it's a very young version of the face. But then there's also this feminine quality, and I was all getting him mixed up with Angelina Jolie. But he's also the dreamy, sensitive type, right? He's the Kiefer Sutherland in Young Guns, you know?
Not to bring too much politics into it, but Jon Voight, a notorious conservative. And yet, I agree with you, a completely other Jon Voight. I knew him particularly for Enemy of the State and some of his older roles, where I guess he plays a tough guy and an intelligent guy. And then I discovered this obviously older version, the young Jon Voight in Deliverance. And this, on the heels of Midnight Cowboy, is undoubtedly his best period. Jon Voight at his absolute strongest, culturally most relevant, and he is the big, strapping, blonde, tough guy seeming type that has a gooier, interior and subverts those expectations of his all-American boy football, tall dude, good looks,
At first, he just struck me as a rando Californian blonde. And then as I saw the nuance in his performance and when he's laying in the canoe and he and Ed and Lewis are challenging each other, and Ed says, I like my life, Lewis. I like my wife. I like my kids. I was like, okay, so he's the main character. And then I really started watching him.
Well, he's the only one given that level of backstory. They're all businessmen from Atlanta, but he is the one with the most to lose, the one that's going to get back. So there's real stakes when he is the one setting off to climb the cliff when no one else can do it and get back at the mountain dude. Real stakes.
That was funny.
For him, but also real stakes for Jon Voight, who actually climbed that cliff because they made this money for $73 and a peanut butter sandwich. The studio was on them, wanted to cut stuff. They didn't want the rape scene in there, so they tried to film it a couple of different ways. That squeal like a pig line is presentable for TV. Like, that's a TV appropriate line that actually replaced the line that was in the script, which I can't seem to find what it was originally scripted to be. They were like, no, we need a non-offensive line so we can air some version of this on television.
Wasn't it funny when Ed comes back triumphant from his wall climb and Bobby's like, didn't think you could do it, Ed. You did it. And he's all denying him but excited at the same time. I thought that was pretty funny. But it's not true that Ed was the only one who had something to lose. It seemed like they all had families. And Drew specifically had a wife and 2 boys. Oh. 2 boys!
Yeah, but Drew, you could see, he was trying to make the connection with Banjo Boy, and he was trying to be just one of the boys, one of the good old boys. Not only, I don't think that camping and survivalism and canoeing was necessarily his nature, but that brings me to the big question, at least for me, one of them. What happened to Drew?
Drew just bit it. He was like, I'm done. He couldn't bear the guilt. The anticipation, the fear was too much.
I guess because he had a lot to lose, because he had a moral compass out of necessity, because he had a whole life that he wasn't willing to sacrifice, wasn't willing to lose based on a lie to prevent Bobby's rape from becoming public knowledge.
Something like that. He was incapable of kind of managing everything that had transpired. And I think that he just jumped into the river, was like, river, take me. Now, why Lewis thought that Drew was shot is a total other mystery.
Wait, how do you know that Lewis thought Drew was shot? Oh, because he said it 36 times. Drew was shot! He was shot, Bobby! Drew was shot!
Something was clearly wrong with Drew before he leans over and falls out of the boat.
Yeah, he shook his head a couple of times.
He's saying, put on your life jacket. So he's already given up, right, on saving his own life should some kind of accident befall them. And then he's like, what's wrong? There's something wrong with Drew. And he's not speaking to Ed. And then he kind of leans over and dives in. It's possible that he could have been silently shot and then silently taken the pain and then decided the pain and the moral guilt was too much and then leaned over. But then they found his body and they were looking for bullet holes, and it wasn't entirely conclusive, but it sure didn't seem like there was an apparent one.
Right? What did Lewis know? Why would he assert that so strongly? And secondly, if he wasn't shot, it seemed to be confirmed by the fact that Mountain Dude was up there with a gun, exactly where Lewis expected him to be, exactly where Ed found him.
What Lewis's motivations were exactly, kind of hard to know, but it does create more drama, and it does create more of an us and them dichotomy, and now we're being hunted on the go, so we have to be vigilant and we have to be on the offensive. So if he's picking them off, they know where he's doing it from. Well, he went up there and waited for an awfully long time, and then the guy shows up at the ideal hunting hour, and we're not even sure if it's the same guy. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the same guy. So it was just a coincidence that this hunter showed up at this point when they were anticipating the guy from the original crime.
for what could have been a much more simple, straightforward, he was shot kind of thing, there were an awful lot of questions for me around Drew's death.
It's the other open-ended stuff in the film that lead me to believe that it's all intentional. It felt like a film that was intended for us to draw our own significance. Like, what is the significance of the boy on the bridge, right? They're dueling banjos, they're having a lively, good old time, and then the kid turns his head and shuns him. But then he shows up on the bridge, and he's very curious. Is it supposed to be cute? Is it supposed to be ominous?
That kid was pretty ominous, right? They chose that kid with zero evidence of acting talent, and of course he didn't have any. They called locals from the hills for shooting, took one look at that kid, and were like, you're hired. And obviously the kid can't play the banjo, so there's lots of contention on how they did it. Supposedly, they ran another person's arm up that kid's sleeve, and someone else behind him is playing the banjo, whether a child or an adult. But then people have examined it and found that that's not possible, the way that some of these shots are framed. But that kid could not play the banjo.
What?
But his face alone, he has such a striking look, and I think it was meant to be ominous. They may be backwoods hillbillies or whatever we're calling them, but he's still ultra proficient on the banjo. There's something in there, and that something could potentially be dangerous. Him appearing on the bridge, swinging his banjo, seemed to me not only ominous, but this idea that they're everywhere, that there's a connected network of people, that it's not just one rogue dude or two rogue guys hunting these guys from the city, but they're everywhere. And there's the kid, and he's connected, and he's tracking them, and maybe signaling. I don't know.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest, with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
So Drew is completely misreading the situation. He's like got the oar up and he's playing the oar and he's like, you and me, remember the music? We're connected.
Right?
And he's completely misreading the situation?
I believe so. Because the kid, he's not out there running to say hi. He just gives him that blank, horrific stare. And I think he just kind of is a personification of the undercurrent that's been dogging us ever since, down this river, ever since they first pulled up. And what they were hoping would be a friendly, innocuous interaction got very weird very quickly. And it blurs the line between filmmaking and real life, where that dude who broke into spontaneous dance, they're like, that's funny and quaint, and boy, these hillbillies are backwards or whatever. But also, we're not in control here. The unexpectedness of their reactions is something that we can't manage. And they're unpredictable. And in fact, that dude just spontaneously broke into dance. The non-actor that they hired to play the gas station guy
was like, these are good tunes. I'm going to tap dance.
Yep. And they caught it on film and went with it.
Stop.
So we have to get to the larger question on whether or not this movie is discriminatory. At the very least, it's not PC, but nobody really attacks this movie except some of the residents of Georgia who are bitter and angry that the surge in tourism, from this movie brought everyone who believes that they're nothing but dangerous, raping hillbillies.
Wait, there's tourism for that? People
Yeah.
We want to see the dangerous rapist hillbillies?
Yes, around in Georgia, this film boosted tourism for that area hugely. And to this day, you can go into the shops in that area and find shirts that say, I hear banjos, paddle faster.
What? Okay, there's so much wrong with this. When you see your Apple TV screensaver of like the beautiful locations, you're like, I want to go there. When you see rapist hillbillies, you're like, I want to go there.
I mean, it was really beautiful in Georgia, and it was meant to be idyllic. And look, we're trying to, even though we're the ones raping the land, we want to go and canoe this river before it's gone forever. Won't this be a piece of history, even though it's our own doing that we're damming the river or flooding the river based on, building the dam? And they actually had to color correct, because this is at the very least a suspense movie, on the far end, potentially a horror movie, and they drabbed it down. They had to make it look less beautiful and idyllic because it was meant to have currents of dread and undertones of horror. And it apparently was still came through beautifully, so that it resonated with people and they sought out these locations.
So what would happen to you if you wore an I Hear Banjos Paddle Faster shirt in Georgia?
You'd probably be shunned by the diehard locals, maybe pursued by the local rapists, and then patted on the back by others for supporting the tourism industry in that area.
Okay. The reactions as diverse as maybe the perspectives on this film. So weirdness all around.
There was not the connectedness, the connectivity of social media, I don't know that television was a big thing in the late 60s in rural Georgia, but those people were so apart from everyone else, at least as this movie was depicted, people couldn't be sure. And it's strange to me that the people that were chosen to be in this movie did act so unpredictably. They said that the little boy who played the banjo was bright, but had to play silent and strange and ominous in the movie. He didn't play the banjo, but he also had a really adverse reaction to Ned Beatty, who played Bobby, and loved Drew, Ronnie Cox. Did you recognize Ronnie Cox, by the way?
No.
He was most famously, probably, he was Bogomil in Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2.
Totally.
And he's in RoboCop. Weird, a lot of cop movies for Ronnie Cox. That's weird. Anyway, the little boy took a real shine to Ronnie Cox, and they did their scenes, and then he was supposed to put on a frown or turn away from him or react badly and couldn't do it. And on the same token, he hated Ned Beatty, the Bobby guy. So when it was time for him to be all pissy and turn away, then Ned Beatty went up and sidled up next to Ronnie Cox, and then the kid was all pissed and looked away.
It's too methody.
And the dancing guy and the other guy, Cowboy Coward, who was actually a friend of Burt Reynolds, who recommended him from that role from a cowboy show he was in. There's this weird line between the locals that were made to act and the stereotypes that they really helped perpetuate or maybe establish. I'm told that this hand coming up in Ed's dream, that apparently this movie established that as one of these tropes, so much so that it influenced Brian De Palma's Carrie and a lot of other movies. That like lone hand coming out of the grave comes from Deliverance. Probably Batman is the closest where the Joker's hand comes out of the vat of chemicals at Axis Power Plant.
I think it'd be curious to know if it either established the stereotypes or reinforced existing ones. I mean, obviously there was enough there that the author, wrote about these backwoods characters, but they're not all bad. Right at the top, Lewis is like, don't judge a person by how he looks or how they look. Those cars will be there. And they are.
Yeah.
The Marin brothers or whatever follow through. And the family at the end is kind of scary looking, but also generous and helps them, and they're not dangerous. But the child was sick that the granny was caring for. And maybe I wrongly assumed inbred.
Maybe it is the sustainability of the inbreeding that's going to it doesn't matter if you flood the area and create the dam and stuff. The danger is still present, obviously will continue for generations. I don't know. Is this movie discriminatory? So the author, James Dickey, I think that's his name.
Yep.
He at one point claimed that everything in this book, he said, I've never told anyone this before, everything in this book happened to me. But then he also claimed to be like an Air Force pilot or something, or a spy or something. And so he was a tale teller. He was maybe a teller of tall tales. But is this movie deliberately discriminatory? Is it simply an honest look that, yes, there are some good people, but away from the law, their domain in the woods, there is and will be lawlessness. And you can't rely on your city polish to save you when you're a fish out of water.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely the pride themes come through very clearly that these city folk need to be put in their place. They're not going to dominate nature. They're not going to dominate the locals. They fail to recognize kind of their fallibility, and they have to be taught a lesson. And the locals, the Appalachians, are being used to illustrate this point and are part of the imminent threat that these urbanites face. Are they being stereotyped? I always say, like, cliches are cliches for a reason. There's some truth there. And I think that James Dickey is using these characters for his story purposes, and they're not necessarily representative of all of Appalachia. That being said, I'm sure it doesn't help, and it probably hurts for these types of characters to be highlighted, for him to suggest that, like, there really is such a threat. It seemed like more likely than not that something terrible was going to befall these guys. And in a way, I wonder if that's kind of what the adventure that they were kind of looking for. When Ed and Bobby first encounter the two, I don't know, perps with the gun, like, they don't seem to be afraid. In fact, they're all standing up to them, and, you know, like, it's like this big, like, cock measuring match until they realize that they're really in trouble.
It's strange in that way. It seems like rapes should take place in dark corners and in secret. This is in broad daylight in front of everyone, you know?
And also, they're toying with them. And it's not like, let's get down to business. Like, part of it is the sadistic, like, toy and power play. Like, I'm going to belt you to this tree so that you watch me rape your friend. Like, it's just sick. Which leads me to the IMDb featured reviews. 8 stars, one of the most disturbing films of all time.
My question is, why is it disturbing? I wouldn't say this lingers with me in the same way that Exorcist does, you know, just a year or so later, maybe a couple years later. It's for a different reason, but now the brutal rape scene that people turned away from, that is what's most remembered, is kind of tame. It's not graphic. It's shot in a way that could be edited for television. I don't know that it's damaging and scarring in the way that some rapes have been presented, or some deaths have been presented. There have been deaths on screen that are more visceral and horrifying, I think, than Bobby's rape.
I don't know. Bobby's off-screen noises, I don't know that I can unhear those. Or the look on John Voight's face, the non-look he's trying not to have. Ugh. 8 stars, nightmarish.
And this must be because, you know, this is what happens when you go out into the woods and you are subjugated by mountain men. And this is why we need gun control and can't leave these people to their own devices with their stills out in nature or whatever, you know?
And then here's a weirdo like you. 9 stars, classic. Gets better with each viewing.
Yeah, but not for. I'm not like, ooh, I can't wait to watch Bobby's rape scene. That's not what it is. But I'm trying to figure out the themes of this movie.
So you want to be put in the philosophical position to contemplate the themes of Deliverance? Is that why you like to watch it?
The audience and the actors were both put through so much. The director was grievously injured by the novelist, and the result is the inversion of these characters. The humanity, the morality of Drew is wiped away when he's the first to die, and the mystery around his death is so interesting that I've watched it several times. Was Drew shot? Did he commit suicide? What in the world is happening? Bobby is the pudgy, contemptuous one, and he is humbled very clearly, and he is not in control of that situation. He's not smarter. In fact, kind of has the same teeth that they do. Ned Beatty could use some dental work, whatever.
Wasn't going to say it. Totally true.
Lewis is the alpha dude who's ready for anything, who's tough and fearless, and then cries like a baby for the whole second half of the movie and has to be pampered and cared for. He's just reduced to absolute. I mean, Ed says, "You're ruined, Lewis. You're ruined." And I was like, what does that mean? I mean, obviously, he's totally useless to them for the rest of the movie. And his cunning, his instinct, his, all that stuff doesn't really serve him. All he can say is, "I don't remember a thing." And that's how we're going to get out of this. Ed is the non-murdering dude with a soul who's just trying to keep everyone safe, who's just trying to get, Drew to put on his life vest. Ends up becoming the most murderer of any of them. I mean, Lewis was trying to save his friend, but Ed sought out the mountain man to murder him and then covered it up. And when Lewis was out of commission, Ed became the main character and is leading this charade to maintain their total ignorance of the disappearance of these dudes. This inversion of characters is so interesting to see. I'm trying to figure it out based on the clues that this movie gives me as to the motivations or really the ins and outs of how justified it is. And it's a difficult thing. It's not cut and dry.
Yeah, and he's even throwing Bobby up against walls and intimidating him. And Bobby's right when he's like, what does he say? "I hope I don't see you around," or "I hope I don't see you for a while," or something like that to Ed at the end.
Their bond got shaken up. They became completely different people through this experience. And their friendship, all the tenets that their friendships hung on didn't really exist anymore.
Yeah, there's the inversion of the group dynamic as well, because Ed conceivably brings all of these guys together for this weekend trip, right? He's the connective thread. He goes on these trips with Lewis. He knows Drew, at least a lot better than Bobby does, because we know that Lewis doesn't know Bobby and insists on calling him chubby and deriding him. We know that there's not the relationship there, right? So he brings these guys together and ironically busts up all of the relationships that he has.
Yep.
So not a movie where nothing happens. Yeah?
No. Stuff happens to these people, around these people, because of these people. Last question. What is coming out of Lewis's leg?
Bone? I'm assuming it's bone.
He yells a couple of times, "I think it's broke. My leg's broke." And then he's like, "Don't touch it." And I'm like, what is it you're not supposed to touch?
I think he's just like, "Don't touch me. It hurts so bad." You saw him go like head over heels out of the canoe, right?
Yeah. Number one, I do think if you watch it again, Burt Reynolds, who knew that was happening, holds his nose before he goes into the water.
No, he doesn't.
I think so. And number two, offered to do that when it was a rag doll. And he's like, "It looks like a rag doll. I want to do it." So he did it, ass over tea kettle into the water, broke his tailbone in the process. Got washed around, got banged up and bruised and stuff, and was pulled out of the water. And Ned Beatty almost drowned, and he recovered, and he was all like alpha male Burt Reynolds, and was like, went to John Borman after he was pulled from a near death, and was like, "How did it look?" And John Borman's like, "It looked like a dummy. You kind of look like a dummy." Anyway, so that. But I've come to this conclusion that they were on a shoestring budget. His pants were awfully tight. So they ripped the seam and they stuck a chicken breast in there. I have no basis for this, and because they could cut it open, and they probably put blood and makeup and stuff on it, and it got washed away in the river. So what we got was, in various stages, this weird meat hanging out of his legs thing that was meant to be like bone, even though his leg wasn't off center enough so that the bone would be protruding from his leg. So I just the first time I watched it, I was like, what is happening? And then I've just determined, like, because of the other weirdness in the movie, it was just leg guts. Just leg guts.
Guts.
That's what we're going with. Some kind of leg guts are sticking out of his leg, and we know he's hurt.
It's just like a pile of intestines that travel down to his femur.
Yep, leg guts.
Maybe more questions than answers in Deliverance, which is maybe why it has the lasting power that it does, because people still today seem to be all about Deliverance, at least weirdos like you.
You know you have cultural significance and staying power if you show up in a Simpsons parody, which of course it did. I think Deliverance is one of those movies that you discover and you're like, oh, I understand. This is like City Slickers gone bad. Either that or you take larger themes, humanity, culture, clash, the fish out of water thing. Whatever the case, I think that it's impactful. Just depends on where you're coming from, what kind of impact it has on you, but I think the impact can't be denied, that you'll never forget Deliverance. In that way, totally, but not for everybody.
Definitely not for everybody.
We should get the sneak to watch it.
Yeah, right. What did you think about today's softball? Let us know, 818-835-0473 or orwhatevermovies@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode on Deliverance, and we'll see you next time.
Electricast.